everyone! Again, welcome to my channel. This is your teacher Claire. And for today's video, as per everyone requested, I think almost everyone requested, I will be reading to you a story. Actually, a creative storytelling. So I will be choosing one story of my liking and later I will present it to you. So sit back and relax and let Teacher Claire handle this. The Legend of the Christmas Rose by Selma Lagerlöf. This story is from Home for Christmas, Stories for Young and Old. Rubber Mother, who lived in Rubber's cave in Goinge Forest, went down to the village one day on a begging tour together with his 5 youngsters, since Rubber Father, who was an outlawed man, did not dare to leave the forest. Now that Rubber Mother went from house to house and begged, she came one day to Ovid, which at that time was a cloister. While the mother was standing quietly at the gate, her youngsters were running out, and now one of them came and pulled her skirt as a signal that it discovered something. The entire cloister was surrounded by a high and strong wall, but the youngster managed to find a little back gate. Ovid Cloister was managed at that time by Abbot Hans, who knew all about herbs. Just within the cloister wall was a little herb garden, and it was into this that the old woman had forced her way. In the garden, a lay brother was pulling up weeds, and it was he who left the door open. When he saw Rubber Mother coming in together with 5 youngsters, he ran toward her at once and ordered them to leave, but the beggar woman walked right on as before. He thought she had not understood him and wanted to take her by the arm and turned her toward the gate. But Rubber Mother is firm and now straightened herself to her full height. I am Rubber Mother from Goinge Forest, so touch me if you dare. And yet the lay brother dared to oppose her, but this time he spoke reasonably to her. You must know, Rubber Mother, that this is a monk's cloister, and no woman in the lands allowed within these walls. If you do not go away, the monks will be angry with me because I forgot to close the gate, and perhaps they will drive me away from the cloister and the herb garden. But Rubber Mother did not budge an inch and continue mesmerizing the flowers, so the lay brother asked for help. But the same thing happens, so they go back to ask reinforcements, and that's when they ran through Abbot Hans and they explained what happened. Abbot Hans upbraided them for using force, and he himself, together with the lay brother, went to the Rubber Mother. When Abbot Hans came to the garden, Rubber Mother was still wandering among flower beds. He regarded her with astonishment, so he came to her and asked in a mild tone if the garden pleased her. But the Rubber Mother said, At first I thought I have never seen a prettier garden, but now I see that it can't be compared with the one I know of. Abbot Hans had certainly expected a different answer. The lay brother, who was standing close by, immediately answered the woman. This is Abbot Hans, who with much care and diligence has gathered the flowers from far and near of his garden. We all know that there is not a more beautiful garden to be found in all Skane, and it is not befitting that you, who live in a wild forest, should find fault with his work. I don't wish to make myself the judge of either him or you. I'm only saying that if you could see the garden of which I am thinking, you would uproot all the flowers planted here and cast them away like weeds, Rubber Mother said. I can understand that you only talk like this to tease us. It must be a pretty garden you have made for yourself among the pines in Goinge Forest. I'd be willing to wager my soul's salvation that you have never before been within the walls of an herb garden. But Rubber Mother can't believe that she was doubted, so she cried, saying, "It may be true that until today I had never been within the walls of an herb garden. But you monks or holy men certainly must know that on every Christmas Eve the great conch forest is transformed into a beautiful garden to commemorate the hour of our Lord's birth. We who live in the forest have seen this happen every year. And in that garden I have seen flowers so lovely that I dared not lift my hand to pluck them." The lay brother is ready for his argument, but Abbot Hans stopped him, for he had also heard about this story since his childhood. So he asked the Rubber Mother that he might come up on the cave on Christmas Eve if only she could send one of her children to show him the way. She said no at first, but she agreed on one condition afterwards. "But more than one follower you cannot take with you, and you are not to waylay us or trap us, as sure as you are a holy man." And Abbot Hans gladly promised, and then Rubber Mother left. Abbot Hans had no plans to reveal his plans, but then it happened Archbishop Absalon from Lund came and stayed for the night. As Abbot Hans showed him the garden, he told him about her visit at the cave and asked the Archbishop to give the outlawed a letter for ransom, that he might lead an honest life among respectable folks. Abbot Hans said, "As things are now, his children are growing up into a worse malefactor than himself, and he will soon have a whole gang of robbers to deal with up there in the forest." But the Archbishop don't care at all and said, "It's better for them to live in the forest." But Abbot Hans is persistent and soon told him about the forest transformation during Christmas Eve. "If these bandits are not so bad that God's glories can be made manifest to them, surely we cannot be too wicked to experience the same blessing." The Archbishop answered, "This much I will promise you, Abbot Hans, that any day you send me a blossom from the garden in Goinch Forest, I will give you letters of ransom for all the outlaws you may choose to plead for." The following Christmas Eve, Abbot Hans did not sit at home, but on his way to the forest. One of the robber children, together with a lay brother, was his companion. Abbot Hans had been longing for this, that he was so happy, but it was the opposite for the lay brother. It's obvious that he's not happy for it, and he did not believe a single thing about the Christmas Eve garden told by the robber woman. While on their way to the forest, Abbot Hans witnessed on his way that everyone was busy preparing for Christmas. Fires were lighted in the bathhouse, meat and bread were being carried, and so on. As he rode by the little country churches, he observed that people are busy decorating the church, and people were coming with armful of breads and long candles. Now they were onto desolate and wild forest regions. The road was bad and almost stony. The farther they rode, the colder it grew, and after a while they came upon a snow-covered ground. It turned out to be a long and hazardous ride in the forest. They climbed slippery side paths, crawled over swamp, and walked towards the forest meadow with tall trees. And now they finally dismounted, and the child opened the door for them. Rubber Mother was sitting before a log fire, and Rubber Father was asleep in the bed. "Come in, you out there!" shouted Rubber Mother, "and fetch the horses with you, so they won't be destroyed by the cold night." So Abbot Hans made his way inside, and the lay brother. Here was richness and poverty. No Christmas preparations at all. The youngsters were sleeping on the floor, and no better food was provided. Rubber Mother spoke in a haughty and dictatorial tone as she was. "Sit down by the fire and warm yourself, Abbot Hans, and if you have food with you, eat. For the food which we in the forest prepare, you wouldn't care to taste. And if you are tired of the long journey, You can lie down on one of the beds to sleep. You need not be afraid of oversleeping, for I'm sitting here in the fire keeping watch. I shall awaken you in time to see that which you have come up here to see." Abbot Hans agreed, but he was so fatigued that he was hardly able to eat and fall asleep. The lay brother, on the other hand, is anxious as he was, that he tried not to fall asleep to stand guard, but fatigue got him gradually, that he dropped and dozed. When he woke up, Abbot Hans is already talking with the outlaws. He was sharing all about the Christmas preparations he witnessed on his way. But Robber Father got angry and said, "You miserable monk, did you come here to coax for me, my wife, and my children? Don't you know that I'm an outlaw and may not leave the forest?" Abbot Hans fearlessly replied, "It is my purpose to get a letter of ransom from Archbishop Absalom." But he didn't finish when they caught him with laughter. Robber Father said, "Oh, if I get a letter of ransom from Absalom, then I'll promise you that never again will I steal so much as a goose." The lay brother was annoyed the way they treat Abbot Hans. Suddenly, Robber Mother rose. "You sit here and talk, Abbot Hans," she said, "so that we are forgetting to look at the forest. Now I can hear even in this cave how the Christmas bells were ringing." They all rose and rushed out. When the bells had been ringing a few moments, a sudden illumination penetrated the forest. Then Abbot Hans saw that the snow had vanished from the ground, and the earth began to take in a green covering. Then ferns shot up their fronds. Abbot Hans' heart beats fast as he marked the first sign of the forest awakening. "Old man that I am, shall I behold such a miracle?" Another wave of light came in, and with it the splash of rivulet and splash of cataract. The woodpeckers started to hammer on the limes. Flocks of starlings from up country lighted in a fire top. They were paradise starlings, glittered like so many jewels. Another wave of light came in, and seeds that have been brought from southern lands by birds and wind sprung up the moment they touched the ground. Blueberries ripened, cranes and wild geese shrieked in the air, and the baby squirrels began playing on the branches of trees. The next light wave that came rushing in brought milkmaids coaxing the cows. Pine trees were so thickly clothed with red cones, the juniper berries changing colors, and forest flowers covered the ground till it was all yellow, blue, and red. Abbot Hans bent down to the earth and broke off a wild strawberry blossom, and as he straightened up, the berry ripened in his hand. The mother fox came out, and Robber Mother praised her young. The horned owl, who had just begun his night chase, was astonished by the light and went back to his ravine to perch for the night. Robber Mother youngsters stuffed themselves with wild strawberries that hung on the bushes, large as pine cones. One of them played with young hares, another ran a race with some young cows, and the third caught an adder from the ground. Robber Father was standing out in a marsh eating raspberries. When he glanced up, a big black bear stood beside him. "Keep to your ground! You! This is my turf!" Then the huge bear turned around. New waves of light brought seeds of starflower. Then came butterflies that looked like flying lilies. The beehive in a hollow oak was already so full of honey that it dripped down on the trunk of the tree. The loveliest roses climbed up the mountain wall in a race of blackberry vines. Abbot Hans think of a flower he was to pluck for Bishop Absalom, but each new flower that appeared was more beautiful than the others. Waves kept coming, and Abbot Hans thought what earth could bring again. He said to himself, "I do not know what new beauties the next wave that comes can bring it." Another light coming, Abbot Hans felt a celestial atmosphere enfolding him. The earth's joys had come, that the glories of heaven were approaching. Abbot Hans was very overwhelmed that he dropped to his knees, but the brother beside him were thinking of dark thoughts. This cannot be a true miracle, since it is revealed by malefactors. This does not come from God, but has its origin on witchcrafts by Satan. It is the evil one power that is tempting us. The angels' harps and tones were getting closer, but the lay brother thought it was the evil spirits. They would enchant and seduce us, and we shall be sold into perdition. The angels was so near that Abbot Hans saw their bright forms, but the lay brother only saw dread evil. All the while, the birds are circling around the head of Abbot Hans, and they let them take in his hands. But all animals were afraid of the lay brother. Then there came a little forest dove. She plucked up courage and flew down on the lay brother's shoulder and laid her head against his cheek. Then it appeared to him that sorcery were come right upon him. He struck with his hand at the forest dove and cried in such a loud voice, "Go thou back to hell, whence thou art come!" Just when the angels were so near that Abbot Hans felt their feathery touch, their song was hushed when the lay brother's words sounded. All the lights vanished, darkness sank over the earth, and frost came. Abbot Hans felt how his heart sank. I can never outlive this, that the angels from heaven had been so close to me and were driven away, that they wanted to sing Christmas carols for me and were driven to flight. Then he remembered the flower he promised to Bishop Absalom. In the last moment, he fumbled among the leaves to try and find a blossom. When the robber folk and the lay brother made their way to the cave, they noticed Abbot Hans' absence, so they went out to search for him, only to find him dead, covered with snow. Then the lay brother started to blame himself, for he knew he had killed Abbot Hans, for he had drifted away his happiness. Abbot Hans had been carried down to Ovid, and they noticed that his right hand were locked tight. When they opened his hand, they found out that he was holding onto a pair of white root bulbs. The lay brother who accompanied Abbot Hans took the bulbs and planted them in the abbot's garden. He guarded it the whole year to see if any flowers will bloom, but in vain he waited through the spring, summer, and the autumn. When winter came, all flowers were dead, so he ceased caring for them. But when Christmas Eve came again, he remembered Abbot Hans and walked into the garden thinking of him. And look, as he came where he planted the root bulbs, he saw some flourishing green stalks which bore beautiful flowers with silver white leaves. He called out all the monks, and they noticed that it grew on Christmas Eve, so they understood that these flowers had in truth been plucked by Abbot Hans from Goinch Forest on Christmas. So the lay brother asked the monks if he can take a few blossoms to Bishop Absalom. He gave him the flowers and said, "Abbot Hans sends you these. They are the flowers he promised to pick for you from the garden in Goinch Forest." He sat in silence for a moment and said, "Abbot Hans has faithfully kept his word, and I shall also keep mine." And he ordered that a letter of ransom be drawn up for the wild robber who was outlawed and been cast to the forest. When the lay brother delivered the message, he came into the cave on Christmas Day. The robber came toward him with axe uplifted. "I'd like to hack you monks into bits, as many as you are," he said. "It must be your fault that Goinch Forest did not last night dress itself in Christmas bloom." "The fault is mine alone," said the lay brother, "and I will gladly die for it. But first, I must deliver a message from Abbot Hans. Hereafter, you and your children shall play in the Christmas straw and celebrate your Christmas among people, just as Abbot Hans wished to have it. The robber father was in awe, so robber mother replied, Abbot Hans has indeed kept his word, and robber father will keep his. The robber outlaws left the cave. The lay brother moved in and lived all alone in constant meditation and prayer that his hard-heartedness might be forgiven him. But Goinge Forest never again celebrated the hour of our Savior's birth and of all its glory. There lives today only the plant which Abbot Hans had plucked. It has been named the Christmas rose, and each year at Christmas time, she sends forth from the earth her green stalks and white blossoms, as if she never forget that she had once grown in the great Christmas at Goinge Forest. That's the end of this story.